Hey there, welcome to Worth It Wednesday. Every Wednesday we send a principle worth learning, a question worth answering, and a recommendation worth taking. Today's principle is that sleep is part of stewardship. I want to tell you a story about where I collided with this principle recently. And there's another principle that I often say probably about at a minimum once a week nowadays, and it's related to the idea of being a curious leader that leverages questions. I like to say that good leaders give answers to people. Great leaders extract answers from people. And it's something that I've probably been saying for about the past year now. We've included it in this Worth It Wednesday email. I'll say it a lot on the coaching calls that I do one-on-one with business leaders. I'll say it on our office hours calls. I'll say it in workshops, right? It's one of those things that's just kind of embedded in our content and embedded in the way that we think about both leadership and coaching, that good leaders give answers to people. Great leaders extract answers from people. So I say this all the time. And so you can imagine I was a little bit mortified whenever I was just spot checking and reviewing one of our podcasts from a few weeks ago. And I was listening to the podcast, and sure enough, in that podcast, I referenced that principle. And here's what I said. I said, good leaders give answers to people. Great answers extract answers from people. And I sat there listening to it, and I was like, what the heck? Because that last sentence doesn't make any sense, right? I said great answers extract answers from people. And so at first I was like kind of upset. I was like, what the heck? How did you do that? But then also a little bit shocked. It's like, what happened there? Like, how on earth did I just say a sentence that I say all the time? And I just completely missed the fact that I missed it. And of course, there's a couple things that could have happened there. Like, I could have been on autopilot. I might have been distracted. I might have been thinking about what I was going to say next. Those are all certainly possibilities associated with what caused that particular mistake. But I spent a little bit of time on it, and I said, like, okay, if we were to kind of like just go back and try and figure out like what actually happened there, what caused that mistake to happen. Obviously, I can never know for sure, but in looking back at the calendar and thinking about what led up to that recording in terms of preparation, I honestly think I identified it. Because I looked at the calendar of when we did that recording, and I thought back specifically to the night before. And I remembered something about the night before. The night before, I stayed out later than I intended. And the next morning, I had a meeting that I had to get up really early to prepare for. And so instead of getting the optimal 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I got probably about 6, maybe even less hours of sleep. And I'll tell you, I can't know for sure, but I think that was actually behind that mistake of me saying a sentence that made zero sense. And you may be thinking like, okay, dude, it's like one mistake. It's not that big of a deal. And I agree with you. It's not a huge deal. I'm not taking it too seriously. But here's why I think it's important for us to focus on. And here's what I took out of that moment that I think applies to other things. Here's what I do know to be true. Whenever I sacrifice sleep, right? Whenever I get less than optimal sleep, less than 7 to 8 hours, without a shadow of a doubt, I just know it to be true. My sharpness, my engagement, my energy level, and honestly, my mental acuity, it absolutely decreases without a shadow of a doubt. And I bet you've experienced this too. And that's really important for me to pay attention to, because if we're not careful, we may think like, oh, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, it's like a nice to have, it's not a need to have. And ultimately, like, it's going to be the thing that I sacrifice, because that can be a really selfish thing, right? Is to make sure I'm getting enough sleep. And what I need to remember is it's like, no, that's not selfish at all. That's actually stewardship, because you and I, we've been given this brain. You and I have been given this body. You and I have been given businesses and people and relationships that we're supposed to steward. Those are all gifts, right? And when we do anything that makes us less well-positioned to bring our full selves to those scenarios, well, then we are actively not stewarding the gifts that we've been given, right? So you've been given a mind, right? And the way that you steward that mind is you make sure that you invest yourself into the activities that will be an investment in sharpness, energy, and mental acuity. And 7 to 8 hours of sleep is like one of the primary things that you can do, that you can actually control, that will ensure that you're able to show up every day, in every meeting, in every relationship, in every decision, in every way that you think about the future of your business and the people you lead and your family, that will make sure you're not showing up just on survival mode or consuming, but rather you're able to contribute. And so it's really inspiring, but also helpful for me to remember, like, okay, the sleep, it's something that only I can control, but it's something that if I do it right, it affects way more people than just me. And your sleep, it's something that only you can control, but if you actually manage it and invest in it and steward it well, it's something that will affect way more people than just you. And so sleep is not a selfish activity done right, done properly, invested in sleep is stewardship. You're making sure that you are sharp whenever you show up into what you're called to do every single day. Sleep is stewardship. Let's go.